could I retire and have enough money to draw the income I need if I go into retirement and I have 1/3 less money than I have today? Hey, what's up guys? Matt Franchina here. I'm co-founder of Policy Engineer. I'm sitting down with Richard Eggers, our mastermind, typically behind the camera, but here to ask some questions that you might also be thinking yourself. We just talked about economic cycles, how election years affect the markets, got into a little bit on my opinions about taxes, business, loopholes, things of that nature. And yeah, I hope that you really like it and take a second to subscribe and share this with anybody that you think will benefit from it.
We made a video recently on economic cycles. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. And I guess my biggest question is where you think we are in the cycle and what that means. But if you want to give some context to cycles and then where you think we are.
Yeah, for sure. So there's 4 economic cycles. You have expansion, when things are growing and it's going up. You have peak, which is when you hit the max, the top of that expansion period, and it kind of stops. Then you have contraction, which is when things are going the other direction. They're contracting, they're getting smaller, they're the economy and everything's slowing down. And then you have trough, which is the bottom of the contraction, where things start to turn and move into the next phase of expansion. And so there's like specific things that will indicate when we're in an expansion or a contraction period. One of them is typically when we're in an expanding period of the economy, interest rates are low, things like job growth and GDP are positive and growing and going up and doing really well. Then that usually leads to interest rates rising some. And so when you see a peak in interest rates, which you identify the peak by them starting to lower them, then it's usually the turn of that, right? So we just experienced interest rates rising over and over for a period of time. They reached record highs, at least within the last 15 years. And that was a result of the economy or inflation being hotter or larger than what we want, right? Than what's healthy. The goal is to have inflation be around 2.5%. And we got all the way up into creeping at double digits. So the Fed increases interest rates to try to slow things down. And they increased them for long enough that they felt now's the time to start to lower them because the economy was starting to slow down. So we're in a contraction phase right now. We hit the peak and rates are going to start to come down. As they come down, and how long things will contract, there's no exact prediction on that. I don't know how long it will happen, but that's where we are in the cycle is now the length of time they held rates high and how much that slowed down economic growth. That will be shown over the next coming months or year as we go through this contraction period. And then eventually they'll lower rates. Rates will hit what they say is, a bottom. They'll hold there for a while and then they'll turn. So, there's more complexities to it than that, but that's the basics.
So we don't know how far down it's going to go down. Is there anyone who does know that, or is that just kind of?
That's whoever's got that crystal ball. There's lots of predictions out there, but right now the Fed is talking about a soft landing. That's what they're hoping for, which would mean that they are able to reduce inflation back to what is ideal without causing us to go into a recession. And so the basic identifier of being in a recession is going to be if we see the GDP in the country going down for 2 quarters in a row. So if we have negative GDP, gross domestic product growth, for 6 months in a row, then that's the main indicator we're now in a recession. Typically what follows that is also declines in the stock market. And so a soft landing would mean that they were able to get inflation under control and never cause us to go into a recession, which in the recent past hasn't been the case. The last few times this has happened, it has led to a recession. And it's A lot of it has to do with timing. Can they time how they're pulling these levers to, manipulate the results of the system, and they don't time it right, every time. So how long is it going to last? I don't know, and I'm not going to make that prediction. All I know is that the writing on the wall says that we should see some reset, some decline, some sort of recalibration, which usually happens with some heartache in the form of recession or some contraction of jobs and companies maybe not hitting the revenue targets they wanted, stuff like that. So
how does that affect people's retirement planning and all that? Like, depending on where you are, I guess if you're a little bit older, or for younger people, say like myself, I'm coming into my 30s, so I'm not thinking about retirement, but thinking about these cycles and how to plan for stuff like that.
Well, I think best way to wrap your head around it, why don't we go back in time and just pretend it was like 2007. So the last time interest rates were at a peak that the Fed started to then lower was 2007. In September of 2007, the Fed rate was at 5.25, just like it was this September that just passed. And mid-September 2007, they lowered interest rates by 50 basis points, or 0.5%. And they just did that this September that passed. So rewind back, we're in 2007. If you're somebody who's close to retirement, you're in what we call the red zone. You only have a little bit of distance between now and that finish line of retiring, then it is tremendously impactful.
About what age is that, would you say?
Let's say, well, the average person is typically trying to retire around 65. That's kind of that number that's been out there for a long time. It's moving further because Social Security, you can't get full Social Security until you're 67 now. 66 and 10 months, but we'll call it 67, right? So most people are retiring between 67 and 65. So if you're 60 to 62 years old, you're within 5 years of that. Here's the issue. Rewind time, it's 2007. You're 60 or 62 years old. You're getting ready to retire. You have $1 million in your portfolio. If you were invested like moderately, you probably saw a decline from 2007 until the beginning of 2009, that year and a half period the market was down. You're probably down 1/3. So your $1 million is now basically $700,000. Okay. If you were invested more aggressively, like matching the S&P 500, you were down 51%. Okay. If you're down 51% or 50%, you need to make 100% return on your money just to get back to where you were. So how do these economic cycles and the contraction period affect somebody who's near retirement is, well, if we don't have a soft landing and we go through this cycle and there's sort of like a crash and then recalibrate and then grow from there, it can affect you a lot. Because what's the likelihood you're going to make 100% return on your money in the next few years right before you retire? And so, it depends how below your means you were living. Everyone's situation is going to be unique, but this leads to something called sequence of returns risk. So, are you familiar with that?
A little bit. We've talked about it.
Okay. So, basically, sequence of returns risk is the order in which you profit or lose in your accounts matters when you're drawing money off of it. Because let's just say you go into retirement or you're about to retire and there's a massive loss in the stock market the year before or even the 2 years in a row before you go to retire. Well, you're going to have a lot less money than you thought you were going to have, and your retirement is most likely going to require you to draw some money off because Social Security is not enough for most people, and they need to supplement that difference. So, man, I can go down a deep rabbit hole and talk a lot about it, but to just keep it basic for a minute, if you're close to retirement and we're at the beginning of this contracting cycle and there's a chance we could go into a recession, you really need to reevaluate. Could I retire and have enough money to draw the income I need if I go into retirement and I have 1/3 less money than I have today? If you can't, then it's very important that you consider like a recalibration, a rebalancing of your assets. Because, I mean, like, yeah, it might be a coin toss. We don't know if we are or are not going to go into that recessionary period. But you can't survive if we do. So you can't take that chance. And you'd probably be better off making a little less, but preserving your ability to retire than possibly losing a bunch. And I want to be very clear, like anyone who's listening to this, this isn't financial advice. You shouldn't take this as personal advice to make decisions, but you should take this as a conversation that maybe prompts you to go talk to a financial professional, evaluate what it is that you're doing, use some of the softwares available online to test your portfolio and see, could I sustain some losses if we go into a recessionary period. And I just want to stimulate people to look at it, because
For sure.
there's a lot of people who got caught by surprise in 2008, because 2007 everything was going well, 2008 everything was in the toilet, and there were many people who had scheduled retirements. They were turning 65, they were ready to go, and they had to delay them, or they had to significantly alter the lifestyle they were going to lead because they had so much less money available.
So had they had in '07 those people who took a bigger hit than others, had they had just the education or the resources or the information to act a little bit more, do you think it could have saved a lot of people? Like, is that something that's accessible and doable for more than just people who have all this money and can like adjust things? Like,
yeah, I mean, in today's day and age, technology has democratized the access to tools that can help you do that. I mean, for example, you can go to our website, and in the financial freedom section of the website, you can go in and use the My Blocks tool. This gives you the ability to go in, put in how much money you have, what your retirement income is going to need to be, how much you collect from Social Security, and how much risk you're taking, and whether or not you're continuing to save. You put all these factors in there, and it'll shoot out a number that'll say this is your probability that you can do what you say you're going to do and live through, a whole slew of economic cycles and make it out the other end. It's determining what your probability is that you'll live till whatever age you tell it and not run out of money, and it accounts for inflation and all that stuff. So today's day and age, there's all kinds of tools. There were less of those tools available to the general public back in 2007, and less of those back in 2000, or when the dot-com bubble popped. Right. They weren't available to people, right. And back in the 80s they weren't. So there is more and more availability for somebody to know if they're going into this okay or not. It's a matter of being willing to spend the time. You got to be able to sit down for 30 minutes or an hour and say, okay, let me look at everything and make sure that I'm positioned correctly.
I don't know if this is too vague of a question, but in Orange County, or like the people that in this area, people you've worked with, percentage-wise, how many people do you think can retire when they want to retire, or are able to retire, or are gonna survive downturns and stuff like that? Like,
yeah, that's a funny question to answer, because I think that my number that I'm going to give is skewed from the actual number of who can, because it's so common that the people who seek the advice and seek working with a company like ours, they tend to be the ones who were preparing, who are in a better position, and the ones who want to ignore our calls, who click and download something but then won't give us the time of day when we're pursuing them, are more often than not the ones that don't have it together and probably won't end up having enough. So I would say of the people I'm sitting down to that are coming to our company and asking for me to sit and like break all this down, it's pretty high. I'm probably getting 85 to 90% of people I'm meeting with where we can construct a plan that they can make it happen. And sometimes we might have to make some minor adjustments or come up with budgeting where it's like you need to reduce something here, or you go into retirement but don't buy another new car, or some sacrifices they have to make, but it's doable. But I don't think that there is 85 to 90% of people who live in Orange County who can retire and are not running the risk of outliving what they have.
Right.
I think that there's a significant percentage of people who've done some saving, and if they don't modify their lifestyle a lot, then they will end up running out of money. Modifying their lifestyle, like, they're going to drive the same car all of the rest of their retirement.
Yeah.
Like whatever they have now, they're not going to go and add a $500 or $600 or $700 or $800 payment like they're used to, right? They're not going to go out and eat as much. They won't be able to treat their grandkids and their kids as freely with money the way they did while they were working. And because they spent that way, they got to retirement with a lot less stacked up. And they're going to now rely on Social Security, and a little bit they'll be able to pull off. So that's a hard question to answer, but for us, it's a pretty high percentage of people we meet with that can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are going to have your own experience with it.
Yeah.
And you can, I mean, I know there are numbers, like you can look at like objective numbers, I guess, about what is actually happening, but that's interesting. I never thought about, like, you're just getting exposed to the people who do care and want to have the conversation and all that. We talked a little bit yesterday or 2 days ago about stock market trends and elections.
Yeah.
I thought that was super interesting. Do you want to unpack that a little bit about what you brought up?
Yeah. So actually, I think I want to say it was the New York Times or someone just posted an article about this, but one of the most like misconceived things, and we hear it all the time, like whenever I'm working with new people, it's so common during an election year for them to make comments like, oh, I want to hold off. I don't want to make any changes, or I don't want to invest in anything until the election's over because I'm really scared of what's going to happen. But in all reality, stock market has proven over most election years that they're positive. Election years produce results, and the 12 months that follow the election happening produces results. Like way more often than not. I want to say the number is like 85 or 88% of election years have produced positive results. And regardless of who wins, Democrat or Republican, we have seen significantly more positive election years and 12 months to follow elections, regardless of who won. Now, there are some interesting details, which we'll post a separate video on that dives deeper into this, but you do have a difference in how much more profitable the market is depending on if a Republican or a Democrat was voted into office. So check out that video so that you can just kind of dive in and see. I think it's pretty interesting. But all in all, there's this like myth that I should be worried during an election year. When in all reality, you probably could be doubling down because the odds are saying that it's in your favor to be investing during that year.
Why do you think that happens? Just heightened emotion during an election year?
Well, I think people get worried because of heightened emotion during an election year, for sure. I'm willing to bet that there are levers and or things maybe being postponed that affect the market because if you're running for office and you're in office today and you're trying to get reelected, well, odds are that a lot of people will vote with their pocket.
Right.
And so if the economy is perceived to be doing well and your investment in 401k account is performing, then that's going to give you the perception that whoever's in now is doing a good job. So I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to see them being like positive years, right? Mm-hmm. So... But, the last two times that we saw the 12 months that followed the election, not show positive signs and show growth was when Obama's first year in office, after the '08 election or '07 election, right? '08 was his first year,
08, yeah.
right? So '08 was terrible. So it was an election year during the peaking economic cycle,
Right.
and then Bush Jr. being in office right after the dot-com bubble, and
Right.
then going into the year after 9/11 taking place. So the starting of those two presidencies were 12 months after the election showed negative signs. They were both elections that were happening at the changing economic cycle. So kind of interesting. So
Similar to where we are now.
correct, right? So will history repeat itself? I don't know, but
It'll be interesting to see. We'll have to do a 1-year look back at
yeah,
this conversation or where things are at and see.
Yep.
I think that'll be interesting to see. I have on here, we were talking about trade policies and tariffs and political stances now, and like what the future of taxes and tariffs are gonna.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of controversy about this issue specifically of tariffs and stuff, and there's one group of people who are saying that putting tariffs on products that it's going to basically make everything more expensive. And so in one sense, is it going to make everything more expensive? No, but it may increase the price of those products that have tariffs on them.
Mm-hmm.
Or people just turn to the products that don't have a tariff. So, I mean, just being like objective here,
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at a tariff being on there, it may cause an increase in price to that specific product, or it's going to reduce the profitability of that product to the company who's producing it, right? Like one or the other is going to happen, which could cause the price to inflate. A lot of that depends on how does the market respond? Like what do we do as consumers if there's a tariff put on that product and the company decides they're not willing to cut into their profits as much, so they raise the prices? Do we keep paying those prices, or do we pivot to other makers, or do the makers of those products shift their manufacturing and bring it back to the United States, because then there's no tariff on it?
Right.
So there's different things that can happen. My opinion is that most good, sound, long-term things, like decisions, have some pain in the beginning, but have good results in the long haul, right? Like if you're overweight and you want to lose weight, the pain and suffering you're going to go through to lose the weight in the beginning sucks, but it's going to lead to a much better life long term. If you're in massive amounts of debt and you need to sacrifice the way you live to be able to generate more surplus money to pay down that debt, in the short term, your life is impacted in a way where like you have, we'll call it pain and suffering, right? But you don't get to live it up the same way that you were, but in the long term, you get out of debt and you make that happen, right? Making a lot of money, but only living on a little bit of it and investing a lot of it sets you up for a really great financial future, but you don't get to live it up the way some of your friends do now today, right? So the point I'm making is I'm not going to claim to be the world's expert on this subject, but putting tariffs in place, and just me looking at it logically, I think would probably cause some increased pricing and maybe people feeling this pain of some inflation short term, but it should reset some things and cause companies to get creative and to figure out what do they need to do. Some companies will say, forget it, we don't even need to sell our product in the United States. There's a bunch of other countries, if it's a foreign company and they go another direction. Some companies that are US based are going to say, okay, we're going to figure out how to start manufacturing here. But all in all, once the dust settles, I think that if we were to bring more manufacturing back into the United States and developed more jobs here and promoted the products that didn't have the tariff, long term, I think it would be a benefit to the economy. But the immediate right out the gate, you might see some, a little bit of a storm that we face from it.
For sure.
So I don't know. Who knows? We'll see what ends up being put in place. But
I have a question here written down that says, how do different political parties' tax policies affect retirement accounts, particularly 401ks and IRAs?
Okay, so I will say that we should also do like a deep dive video specific maybe on these, but so I think if we keep it somewhat general, it's common that the Democratic Party is seeking like more tax dollars. One of the things that's proposed is that billionaires should pay more in taxes. And so the unrealized capital gain tax has been put out there as something that would be a solution to it. But again, keeping it more general, I see that the Democratic Party more often is looking at ways to use taxes to then provide resources to the general public. And the Republican Party tends to want to reduce taxes, meaning you keep more of your money and then you use the money you've kept to pay for said things, not looking for programs or things to be provided for you in a sense, right? And gosh, this will probably go off in the comments. There's a million people who will probably go off and have a lot of opinions on it. But I think that like being a business owner and having payroll and payroll taxes and Social Security and Medicare and a lot of things that we pay into, those things are not seen that often by anyone who's never had a business with employees. Like anyone who's ever tried to scale a company and hire people, you realize that the cost of doing it is significantly greater than the cost at like face value. When you just think, oh, I'm going to pay this person X salary, there's a bunch of other costs behind it that are not part of the salary. Every employee has a hidden paycheck in the form of what the company pays into the federal government on your behalf, into Social Security, whatever healthcare benefits are provided, life insurance, all this other stuff. These are expenses that an employee doesn't really see or dissect and realize that, okay, it is being paid. So when you see things like tax cuts and benefits for like corporations and stuff, if they're leveraging that stuff properly, their businesses should grow. If the businesses grow, then it should add jobs. I see a lot of posts that go out where people are like angry or upset at profits that companies make, or like salaries that CEOs get paid and things like that. And I personally get confused by it because I'm like, that money they're making is from products or services they're selling that the marketplace paid for. We all paid for them, right? Mm-hmm. And they've structured a business model where it was able to boil up and offer that much. That same opportunity is available to all of us. It might take generations to match what some others have done, but we all have the option to go out there to try to become an entrepreneur, to build a business, or to work our way up to being an executive at a company that was created a long time ago that has those margins and all that stuff. So I guess I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but like corporations being able to operate and to grow and have an easier time to scale, expand, and make profits typically should put more job opportunities out there, which for those who are not interested in taking all that risk, it does create an opportunity for you to try to demand a bigger piece of that, ask for raises, and that stuff's more available. So, I mean, I tend to favor an environment where capitalism is available, where the marketplace can judge where money goes and stuff. And the other point of view is that there should be more taxes that are paid, and then that money can be used. Taxes are used by the government then to be repurposed or do things with. I just have not found that the 38 years I've been alive and been able to witness how taxes are used, that I have a personal feeling that they're totally used in a way that feels like we should add more money into the hands of those people using it.
Right.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, the specific like tax plans or strategies that the two candidates have and what they would put out there, I think we do a separate deep dive, compare them to each other,
Sure.
right? One thing that is proposed, I doubt it will go through, but is this whole unrealized gains, right?
Yeah.
Having capital gains on unrealized taxes on unrealized capital gains. Basically says if you buy an asset and the asset goes up in value, the way it works today is when you sell that asset, then you lock in the profit. So for example, if I buy a piece of real estate and 2 years later, my real estate went from being worth $100,000 to being worth $125,000, then that $25,000 is a capital gain, but it's unrealized because I don't actually have the money. It's just what the marketplace says my property's worth if I put it on the market and sold it. But property values could go back down. So being taxed on unrealized capital gains says that I have to pay the federal government taxes on my 25% gain, even though I haven't gotten any of that $25,000.
Would that be payment you have to make every year, or as it how does?
I need to study it more. I don't know exactly how they're proposing it. I
Right.
think it's based on a frequency every so many years.
Okay.
And I know they do this in other countries. Like I think it's a thing in Canada.
Yeah.
So it exists out there. But what it does is it creates an environment where imagine a period of like volatility. Something goes up, you have to pay taxes on the gains you didn't have yet. Then the value goes down, and now you're like, shoot, I paid taxes on. Now if I sell it, I paid taxes on money I never even got.
Right.
So in today's marketplace, you buy an asset, you don't pay taxes on the profits until you no longer have the asset,
Unless
and
you
have
receive the
dollars.
money.
Correct.
From what you've gained over the years.
Yeah, when you sell the asset and you have the dollars that
Right.
that lock in on paper.
You're not as affected by the volatility until you choose to sell, and if you're up,
Right.
then you get taxed on that.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
once.
Yeah, and so here's the fear out there that like just regular taxes, the way they exist today, when they were introduced a long time ago, they were only to like a certain group of people who earned over a certain amount, and they were a lot smaller percentage. And over time, that group grew to where everybody pays taxes now.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't always work that way. So the fear out there, if you introduce something like that for the ultra high net worth, is that it starts there, and then eventually it's true for our children and every person who wants to try to step in and become an investor.
Right.
So there is one thing that I would say that I've learned over the years being on the financial services side is that the tax code is definitely designed and in favor of two types of individuals, right? Or two categories. One being businesses, small, medium, large businesses. But if you're a business that provides work for other people, then you have benefits in the tax code because there's lots of opportunities to write things off. And businesses pay taxes on the money left over they didn't use. Individuals pay taxes on every dollar they earned. That's a big difference, right? As an individual, if you make $100,000 a year, you pay taxes on $100,000 a year. As a business, if you generate $100,000 a year in revenue, but you spend $90,000 on things related to your business, you pay taxes on the $10,000 that's left because the $90,000 was a write-off. And it's that way for a reason, and it has worked for a long time because businesses then have the opportunity to, they take all the risk, and then some of that expense is delegating tasks to other people and paying them to do it so they get a job, right? Like, you are an employee of ours. We pay you to do these things, to edit, to create awesome video for us, to get attention for us. Like, you're helping us with all of that, right? If I couldn't write off the wages that we paid you and the money we spend on any kind of software that you use and stuff like that, well, it'd be significantly harder for me to hire you, or I would have to pay you less for your same work because I only have so many dollars I can use. So if I can't write it off and not pay taxes, now I pay payroll taxes, I just don't have to pay income tax on it. But if we couldn't do that, we'd have to pay you less. So the fact that it's there benefits you, right? The second category is investors. When you invest your money, at least the way the code works today, the taxes you pay on the gains there are in favor compared to ordinary income. And real estate investing has tremendous benefits there. And so investors and business owners have significant opportunities in a free country. Anybody can become a business owner and anybody can be an investor. And being a business owner doesn't mean it has to be your bread and butter. We're in like the era of side hustles, right? But creating those do benefit. So yeah, I went off on a side tangent with your question, but
super great. I think having grown up in a world of, I don't want to say rebellious teenagers, but I grew up skateboarding, grew up in Orange County. There's a lot of like frustrated suburban kids who kind of like, lived relatively normal lives. And I think you're just angsty, right, when you're a lot younger and you see the world and you want to push back and you see all these things. And it's hard for like some, not all, but to see like, I want to own a business. I want to sell out. I want to be corporate. I want to do all these things. But it was all driven by corporations that own skateboard companies. All these brands, all these people, all these businesses that help fuel all these younger people to feel a certain way and do a certain thing. It's just this interesting play between business owners and consumers and all that, and kind of they're so connected but feel so detached sometimes,
Right.
And yeah, it's just interesting being in this world with you guys now, having learned so much of it. I mean, by no means am I an expert in all this. I learn something different every time we work on something. I'm with you or your brother and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like, I definitely will say that there are some corrupt business owners out there. There are people who are shady and greedy and don't use they play games beyond the designed tax code and take advantage of people, and like that stuff happens out there. So let's not like pretend like it doesn't.
For sure.
But it's each person's responsibility to be a good human, right? But what's interesting is I think most of those brands growing up, you and I grew up in the same area. I'm a little bit older, but grew up in the same culture and stuff. Most of those brands you're talking about, they're all currently owned by big corporate America. They're not owned by the original founders.
Right.
All of those people learned enough to realize how they were also involved in the game and playing the game, and they sold for tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And a lot of the brands, like, slogans changed over the years too, right? Going from things that were sort of like anti-establishment type of like slogans to just something that veered away from that, right? But
to fit the mold and all that, yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely get how somebody coming up in the world, if they don't have access to the information, then they feel like it's unfair. But I'm here to say that the information is fully available. I mean, my God, with things like ChatGPT and stuff like that today,
we're in the world of information fully.
There's almost no way for anyone to hide the information from you, right? I definitely believe that there are certain like demographics of people who maybe intentionally had information kept from them because other people were profiting from them at some point in time. But right now, it's really hard to believe that you can't get access to the information that you need, because even if you don't have a phone or anything, I mean, you could walk into a library for free and get on a computer and start using the internet and start educating and pulling information off. It's the willingness to put in the work it takes. That's one of the things I've said to myself many times since we went into business. So for almost 16 years, I've been, quote, self-employed, right? Where my income was driven on commission and I was 1099. But for half of that time, I was just an independent contractor. I only worried about myself, my own commissions, right? Then I hired a personal assistant, and that was a big risk. And then just a few years ago, Chris and I started our own agency, and then we decided, we're going to try to scale. We started adding employees. We started delegating. We started taking more risk. And I have had many times where I've said to myself, I'm not going to give up, but it's super clear to me why many people have tried and given up. And it's extremely clear to me why probably 99% of America has no desire in going and becoming self-employed, because it's hard, it's unpredictable, it's costly, it's taxing. You lose sleep over it, you get in arguments over it, your family feuds count. Like, there's so many things that could have been avoided, but you're either doing it because you're super passionate about it and you can't find anywhere that lets you live that passion, or you're doing it because you feel called to try to produce, and if you get it right, you will make profits are unlimited, and so you want to make more, or you feel like the system you're in isn't catering to people and you have a product that the marketplace deserves to have. I mean, there's different reasons you become connected to it, but I can see why people are jaded. And I don't know, I'm not easily jaded. I'm more of a person who I need to see it for myself to make that decision. But I guess anyway, to your point, like, there's a lot of people who, because they see someone and associate that person, that brand, that entity or whatever, they make a judgment, and then they associate every person in that category to be the same, right? So then they're like, forget business, forget investing, it's all corrupt, it's all crooked, it's all this stuff.
Right.
It's not all that way, even though there is some of it definitely.
Yeah, there. And it might be, it's one of those things that I think you get exposed to all the ugly stories. That's what people like to talk about, right? It's like the ugly side of anything. I think that's what sells in news and media and stuff like that. So that might be a factor. That might be a whole different conversation too. Yeah. But yeah, super cool, super interesting.
But it is definitely, think of this, when you talk about the ugly side as the stuff that comes out. Let's say you go on you have a vacation planned, and your flight is on time, and your hotel is available, and the weather is normal while you're there, and everything kind of goes as planned, and you come back. You are not likely to go to the ends of the earth and tell everybody everything went the way it was supposed to go. Right? You're not. You're just going to be like, if people ask, you'll share with them, but it went.
But why is that? Why can't we just openly say, this was awesome, I loved it, it was amazing? Because
I don't know, but I'll tell you this, if one or two things went wrong, I bet you'd be able to tell that story.
Sure.
Like, your flight was delayed,
crying baby,
they lost your luggage, or crying baby, or you got there and you asked for a balcony view and they gave you an inside view, or the weather sucked, or any of the, if one of those things happen, then I bet you'd be, not just you, but people in general are going to report back the thing that went wrong. Definitely. But nobody goes, hey guys, I went on vacation and everything went exactly how it was supposed to. I'm so pumped on that.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so hard to get like positive reviews. I mean, we're meeting with hundreds and hundreds of people every year and like placing new accounts and doing stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's pretty challenging to get Google review, like somebody to go and actually write and post a positive Google review. We have them, but we have 10 times more people who have experienced what they would perceive as going exactly the way they wanted it to go, and some of them well beyond what they expected, who don't take the time to go put it out there on the internet. But I mean, fortunately, we don't have bad reviews out there, but something goes even a little bit wrong. So I don't know. It's just like,
it is interesting. I think that's relatable at any age, and I don't know if it's, I think people connect and relate to each other over misery. Like, oh, I can empathize with you having a bad time, a crying baby, delayed flight, checkout, whatever it is. You know, people might be able to relate with other people more. It almost seems like a go-to conversation piece for people. And I don't know if that's because we feel connected. Like, I feel you on that, you know?
Yeah.
It might be able to bring people in a little. It just sucks that that's the go-to. And we can't just be like, it was amazing. I loved everything about it. And other people to feel, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. You know, that's kind of hard to come by, I feel like, especially with like friend groups and stuff like that. When you have like, there's a few people in your life, I think you can truly just not worry about that coming back to you. But when you're meeting people and in the world of business, you know, I think there's a lot of jealousy and envy and things that can, for sure, you know, but.
Well, I think one thing, it all starts with us, right? So if you're listening to this and you agree with us that it'd be great if there was more positivity and more sharing when things go just the way they're supposed to go and don't have to be like elated and just insanely above and beyond, we just need to share that so that drowns out the negativity that gets put out.
Yeah, it's tough, especially in this world, in this climate, in this like this year, you know, election years always feel a little tense. And so hope we can push the positivity, hope we can push the education and the knowledge, I think is one of the biggest things you guys try to push, which is great. Yeah,
I mean, we definitely want to give access to information. I think that that's the whole thing. We're about, you know, our sales team is trained to do information-based selling, where we're really trying to educate and provide information, bring you along the ride. Not here to just tell you what to do because we know what to do, but to help you understand why you should do this, and then be the agency that facilitates it. But you're actually in agreement. You see it from our perspective and say, I get this professional opinion, and I want that, and so let's do it. Whereas I think there are a lot of professionals out there that are like, look, I did my homework, I took my test, I've been doing this long enough, I know what to do, so here's what to do. And if you don't want to listen to me or you don't want to do what I'm saying, then I'm on to the next one.
Yeah.
And we really try to take the time to educate people and get them to see it through our lens, so that when they're making the decision, they're just using us to facilitate it.
Right. Cool. But, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add?
Oh, man. Well, we did talk about a little bit of stuff being an election year and things like that. And so this, in my opinion, is not the forum for right now to get like political in this interview, but I will say you should go and vote. If you have a stance, then you should stand for the stance and you should vote. And if you're not sure where you stand and you want to know more about things, you do your research. It's definitely available out there. But yeah, it's our responsibility to vote. I think it'd be awesome if we had more votes cast than ever in history. And we'll see, you know, may the people speak, and may the next elected president really be because the majority of the people who felt a way cast a vote, and then it happened, so that nobody can complain later who didn't vote.
Right.
You know, but yeah, anyway, get the information. Knowledge gives you the access to be powerful with it. Knowing stuff doesn't just make you powerful, but I think knowing and being willing to take action, it can. So yeah, learn with us over and over. We're going to keep having more conversations like this, I think, and kind of open up on stuff.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. Like, follow, share, and policy engineer all day.
Sweet.